On this week's podcast, we will be breaking down and really deciding on our three favorite Star Wars moments. But it's not just your top three, it has to be your favorite animated, your favorite live action series, and then your favorite from the movies. So those are our criteria. I think this will be fun. Kevin, what do you think?
It's hard, actually.
Yeah.
uh, the movie was easy. That one has been what it is for a long time.
Mhm.
But man, the live action and the animated were both just because there's a lot of great moments that have been within some of the stuff that's come out recently. So yeah, it was a challenge spreading it out between the three mediums, but I think
Live
I got
action was my hardest. So
really
animated, I like. So I haven't watched all of the Clone Wars. I did like the whole way back when the last season came out. Disney Plus did that like essential 30 something episodes you
yeah
needed to watch. So I mean, I've done those, and that last season, I had a few up there. I had a couple moments
yeah
up there that could have been it. Rebels had a few moments, and then the Bad Batch actually had one that I considered. But
oh nice
animated,
okay
I think one kind of stood above the rest. Live action was just so hard for me because
hmm,
everyone likes to complain about Disney Star Wars, like, oh, they're ruining Star Wars, whatever. They've probably dropped the ball on quite a few things.
sure
Just call it like I see it. But there were so many great Andor scenes for me to choose from.
yeah. There's been some
That was a joke. That was
really
not.
great
I don't
moments.
have any
Hey,
Andors.
I
Listen,
do. Yeah.
I
How
like
about that?
Andor. I like Andor a lot, but it was not. It didn't top my list. But between the
I
Mandalorian,
love Andor.
Kenobi, and Ahsoka, there was a lot to choose from.
Yeah.
So
That was one that I think that's why animated was the hardest for me because there were a lot of different things that I liked for different reasons. It wasn't
okay,
necessarily comparing apples to apples. Like it was I was
yeah,
trying to weigh things for a lot of different with a lot of different criteria, and so I was kind of
you'll see
surprised with
mine
what I
have a
landed
theme.
on. Oh, okay. I think I know what it
Yeah,
might be. So,
yeah, it's a theme. I grew up on it, so it'll be it'll be the way to go.
hey,
So let's go ahead. Let's hop into our animated. So Kevin, I want to hear what yours is.
okay. Man, there was a lot. I mean, we've talked about, I mean, the Jedi Knight episode, right? Like that's one of the big ones that's up there.
Yeah,
Uh, man, the Siege of Mandalore, in the last season of the Clone Wars. I mean, gosh, that is
yep.
such. And then the end of the Clone Wars, right, with Ahsoka fighting through the cruiser, like all of that. That shot at the
That
end,
last
like
scene.
so good.
Oh,
So, but I really, I really ended up on something that was a little bit different. Just I liked it for different reasons. Like it wasn't necessarily the action or but it was something that I felt like just really ties in with Star Wars. And so it's actually one of the things I really really like is it's after Kanan dies, right? And we have Ezra
hmm,
just kind of like he's like on the verge of giving up, right? Like he's kind of lost. He's followed these Loth wolves into this random place, and he has no idea where he is or where to go. And that's when this giant Loth wolf named Dune
yeah,
comes up, right?
yep.
And so he has this conversation with this Loth wolf who speaks very briefly in a few words. But I love the idea, you know, within. So, like Kanan Jarrus, we know that there's this saying with the Jedi, you know, there's no death, there's the Force, right? You know, we see that with Force Ghost throughout all the stuff. You know, Luke says it in the sequel trilogy, right? He says no one's ever really truly gone.
He does say
Um,
that.
he does say that, and so I love that this scene really kind of embodies that in a different way because Kanan Jarrus doesn't become a Force Ghost, right? Like he is really truly gone, right?
The Force,
He is one with the Force now, right? Like the
but he
idea
can
that as you
talk
join
still.
well, the idea that as you join the Force, like you're no longer who you were, right? You just kind of go back to being part of this cosmic force they call it or whatever.
Hmm.
And so I really love the idea though, this kind of tying in with the idea that there is no death, there is the Force, that even as Kanan passes on, there's some part of him that affects the Force, right? Like the idea that he wanted to protect and teach and guide Ezra, like even the fact that he no longer exists, there's a part of that in the Force now that doesn't just that actually seeks Ezra out. Because like in that scene, he's not meditating, like he's not really in a point of calm, but really the Force seeks him out with this wolf. And so I really just like that image that in the midst of Kanan passing on, like his character, his virtue, the good aspects of him, like they're still reflected in the Force. Like this bigger picture of the Force that's not him anymore, but it's still a part of him that is able to affect Ezra. I think that's such a cool scene. There's just a lot in there, and I like that we have this other picture other than Force Ghost, right? Our idea of people existing beyond death is primarily Force Ghost. So I love that we get a different picture of someone who's really truly moved on, but joining the Force seems to affect the Force as a whole, right? And its ability then to
a ripple or something.
Yeah. So I like that scene because it's kind of a different take on the idea of joining the Force and death not being the kind of the final thing.
Yeah. So. Now, what do you think? What do you think about Kanan's voice being in Rise of Skywalker at the end?
My honest answer?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it's kind of cool, but
oh, I like it. No, I love it, but I do think it was a product of hey, let's just throw in all these Jedi voices that we can.
Well, yeah.
I don't think from his. I mean, a lot of them. It doesn't necessarily make sense that they're speaking in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea is that when a Jedi passes on and becomes one with the Force, they're no longer an individual, right? They just kind of return to being part of that larger picture of life and the Force. And so, the ones that stay behind, they're actually kind of refusing to become one with the Force at the time, at least temporarily. So, it doesn't. I like it. It doesn't make sense, but I like it. So
yeah,
I'll just leave it at that.
I just like it because now, again, not it's cool my favorite movie. It's my least favorite movie, but I think it's cool that like for Kanan specifically. I mean, I know like kind of what you're saying. It's probably a better payoff that he doesn't, but for Kanan specifically, like he fought in Rebels against the Empire this whole time, and so he finally gets like one last say against the Empire. I thought that was kind of cool, just for him personally. But
included for sure.
Yeah. So. Just a side note there. I wanted to know what you thought about it, but mine is in Rebels again. I think Rebels is like it's. Outside of the original 6 films, it's the best Star Wars story. Start to finish, it's so good. I mean, it spurs on the Ahsoka series, which is just Rebels season 5. Like, it's very good. And so Twilight of the Apprentice, when Ahsoka is fighting Vader, that was my actual introduction to Rebels. So I was not into animated Star Wars at all. And then I saw it on now this is a really long time ago because when did that was that like 2015 when that episode happened or something like that? It was season 2, right?
That's season 2.
It's 3 at the latest. 3? So if it's season 3, that would have been 2016. Either way, like it's pretty late out. Like it's a long time ago. So I saw it on YouTube or something, just, flipping through, scrolling. And I was like, what on earth is this from? Like where you see this, Anakin with his, half cut and you hear him talking through Vader. And I was familiar with Ahsoka at least. So I was like, what is this? So I watch it and then, end up, I don't know if it was on Netflix at the time or something, but like I watched the whole thing. It was so good. And so just that scene in and of itself got me into, what is Ahsoka's story? So then I have to kind of do some digging on that. And then just a lot to that, right? Like you learn that, or me personally, I learn, this is Anakin's apprentice, and you have these stories with him, like kind of just read the Wikipedia, learning all this. But at the same time, I know Anakin's fall to the dark side. So you kind of get that aspect of he's Vader in there. And it's a really cool fight scene in and of itself, that very unique Rebels animation that they have. But then also it's Anakin reckoning with Vader. and vice versa. So I thought that was just a very cool scene that kind of sentimentally pulled me into animated Star Wars. So I think that one probably
That's cool.
has a hold on me there, because
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have watched animated Star Wars without this happening. I mean, I hadn't yet, because
No,
Clone Wars,
cool.
like, I did not like the first season of Clone Wars. I've watched it a few times, like trying to get going from there, and I just can't do it. But that got me into Rebels, and then Rebels turned into one of my, favorite pieces of Star Wars out there. So sentimentally, that's it for me.
Yeah. It feels very Star Wars, the show does. But no, that is really cool that's kind of like it grabbed your attention and got you into it. So I can see how that would be like a favorite scene. And it is a really cool scene. We see a bit of, Ahsoka's like, well, this time I'll stay, right? Like, it's a pretty cool moment, which is like, I'm not going to abandon you again. Yes, that is a good scene. That one's up there too.
And I had to do some digging to figure out what that even meant. No clue.
Yeah.
But yeah, just looking at it from...
At the time, we didn't even really have finality on that, right? We know she had walked away from the Order, but
we just knew she left.
Clone Wars didn't exist at that point. So.
It didn't exist for a few more years from there. Yeah. No, that's true too. But that whole episode actually is like, it's a 2-part, right? Like, because they're going through what planet are the Malachor? Is that right? Is that where they are? Yeah. So that whole little arc, if you want to call it, is just really good in general, in my opinion. So
yeah,
I like it.
Maul in there, who's really interesting in Rebels. Like, he's got a really cool arc. So yeah, it is good.
Yeah, he gets some legs.
That's when Kanan gets blinded.
Yeah, he gets blinded by Maul. Yeah,
so a lot happens there.
I think do the Inquisitors do the helicopter spinning thing on that episode too that everybody hates?
There. Yeah, because it makes sense, right?
I think that's cool.
Sure.
But people that hate Rebels animation, I'm sure, do not like that, because that episode and that duel is like the pinnacle of Rebels animation, where it's like almost blurring together.
Yeah, like, it is different.
But the soundtrack is good as well. The score when they're fighting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's real good.
It's kind of similar to when Obi-Wan and Vader fight in Kenobi as well. It's kind of got those same vibes to it, but we'll touch on that in a few minutes, I suppose. Did you have any runner-ups for yours?
I mean, Jedi Knight's...
You don't have to go into detail, but...
No, Jedi Knight's always a big runner-up. Yeah, I do. I mean, the World Between Worlds in Rebels, I mean, that's an awesome scene. I love that one. And then Clone Wars, just that sequence at the end with Ahsoka and Rex.
Yeah,
that's hard to beat too. So those were all definitely up there. Ultimately, I settled on the ones just because it was a little bit different, and I like it.
I ran through a few. So the finale of Rebels, Jedi Knight, and Rebels. I thought that would be cliche, though. We kind of talked about that. And then, so those two. The Rebels finale is very good. Like, with really the epilogue and everything, it's good.
No, it is really good.
Jedi Knight, of course, is one of the greatest pieces of Star Wars entertainment ever produced. But then also in the Bad Batch, I really like the season 2 finale, like with Tech and that line, like, when do we ever follow orders? I thought that was a good payoff there.
That was a bright spot in a otherwise ho-hum season.
Very ho-hum. Ahsoka versus Maul is incredible in the Clone Wars. That's so good.
It's a great fight.
And
they brought Ray Park back to do the motion capture for that.
Yes, he's in like all the
super cool.
The dots and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
He still can do it. And then the last one would have been kind of different. Like, all these are just like, oh, what could it be? I really like that episode in Tales of the Jedi with Dooku, where he does turn and fight Seattle.
Yeah.
That's like, I mean, that's just immediately after the Phantom Menace. And so I thought that was pretty cool as well.
I mean, yeah, when you branch out, like, there's a lot of really good stuff to choose from in the animated realm. Even not as a whole, but like even some of the Vision stuff is like really, really good.
Oh yeah, like the one with the wedding.
Excellent, yeah. And so, there's a lot of good stuff in the animation realm to choose from. So
it is true. It's where Star Wars shines nowadays. Sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, it's doing well.
Yep. So
depending on who you ask, I guess.
that is true. That is true. So live action, we can keep alternating. So live action series, not like live action movie, but a Disney Plus series. What was your favorite?
I mean, I was surprised. There's a lot of good stuff in the live action. Honestly, as much as no. So if you go to Ahsoka, right, the World Between Worlds again,
It's so
with
awesome.
Anakin and Ahsoka, that's outstanding. Probably one I won't mention because I think you're going to talk about it.
Okay.
And then I actually had two from Andor, right? Like the
One Way
Aldhani
Out or whatever.
heist. Like that one's great with the eye on
with
the planet.
Is that the one with the where they're like that event is happening? Is it that one?
Yeah, and they're trying to rob that armory or
That is a good episode.
The level of tension in those, like in that episode, is just ridiculous. Right?
Well, it had like 3 hours of build up to get there.
Yeah,
like 3 episodes leading up to it.
Listen, some people are going to be like, "You're picking Andor," but no, actually, it's the prison break scene, right?
Yeah,
and
that's good.
Part of me, I love Andy Serkis, right? Like I think he is phenomenal. I think he elevates every role he's in. Whether he's doing motion capture as Gollum or in Star Wars, right? I think he is incredible. So
you can feel him like through his voice acting.
Yes, yeah, no,
he's good.
He's incredible. So already excited to have him in there. But like his character that he plays is great in that sequence, right? Like I feel like they did a really good job of building up to that. And so you obviously have the culminating moment where you realize he's not getting out, right?
Can't swim.
And I love that there's just such an insignificant detail, right? Like you read a biography about Kino Loy and it's like he can't swim. You're like, who cares? Right? But it's a little tidbit that matters at this moment at this time. And I think about one of the reasons I love this part, not only because it's tense and it's exciting and you're rooting for these people the whole time, but I love the impact that I feel like this has on Cassian, right? Like he goes into this place very much lone wolf, like I'm all about myself. I'm just trying to get by. And he probably keeps that perception throughout his interaction with Kino Loy, right? Like this guy doesn't want to escape. He only cares about himself. He's just trying to get out. And so for Cassian to learn right at the end there, like I feel like he has to go back through his head and think about everything Kino did and said throughout this breakout and this thing that they're doing, thinking he knew he was never going to get out. And I feel like that has to impact what we see Cassian do next, right? Like as he leaves this place, he's different. And so it's such a Star Wars thing, right? That like someone's sacrifice has this impact that changes something, right? That makes a difference in some way. And so it does, like the same way you look at Cassian, the same way that Cassian probably looks at this. I feel like it forces the viewer to kind of look back at Kino Loy throughout all the episodes prior as like, maybe he wasn't this jerk. Maybe he didn't care about himself, right? Like he really created a structure to this workroom that would have helped people get out better, right? Like people thought he was a jerk, but he thought he was doing something helpful. And then with when he decides that he's going to break out, right? He's literally doing that for everyone but himself. And so that culmination of all of that and the way it's written and the way it builds up and the way it finishes, I could watch that episode over and over, just because it's so good. Again, just between the tension, the writing, the characters, the acting, that sequence throughout that prison break is just it's so good.
Yeah. Well, he had, again, the Andor had the liberty of just these, was it 4-episode arcs? They did 4-episode arcs. And so you get like 3 episodes to pay off essentially this finale of an arc. Yeah. And his is, all of the payoffs are good in Andor, in my opinion, but his is so personal. Like it is. They make you fall in love with him over time. And then it's like, and he's a goner. Well, we assume he's a goner. What if we, right? Like,
I mean, we don't really know, I guess, right? Like,
they took him back in, obviously, but I assume they
My guess was they were all executed, but I mean, we
Yeah.
don't know. So,
What if they made him go ahead and jump?
so bring back Andy Serkis, not Smoke. I would love that. Just as long as it's
Yeah.
not Snoke.
I actually like
Although that
Snoke. I
could have
wish
been
he would have
great.
hung
No, I mean
around
that.
longer.
Yeah, Snoke was a missed opportunity. But no, to your point, Andor as a whole, right? Like it really is just these like short segments of Cassian's life, but the people around him in those
Yeah.
segments, and kind of how those things are changing him into something. It's so good. I know some people absolutely hate Andor, but man, I love it.
It's good. It is good
Oh
storytelling.
man, yeah,
It's good drama. Lots of payoffs. I understand because it's like, oh my
I do
gosh,
too.
when are we
I
gonna
get
get
it.
to the payoff? But
Everybody likes different things.
yeah,
It's fine,
yeah,
but man,
for sure. So for mine, again, the theme continues. It's gonna be, and this is not my favorite Disney Plus live action series. It's probably, I like all of them, but it's probably
yeah,
towards the bottom just because as a whole, I don't think it's very strong.
right,
But Kenobi versus Vader, on that, is it a moon? I guess they fight
yeah.
on. Not the first time where Vader whips him, but the second time where Obi-Wan means business.
Hmm.
It is so good, especially if you watch Revenge of the Sith, the very end of it, and then you watch the Kenobi intro where it gives you the little prequel background,
Hmm.
and it ends with Obi-Wan, with his "You Are the Chosen One" spiel. And then you go watch that episode, and don't even watch the whole episode, because honestly, the whole episode kind of stinks. As like, if you look at it from the she knows about Luke, I mean, that drives me nuts. But a lot that doesn't make sense. But that one scene where
Yep.
they are fighting, the score is perfect, the emotion is high. I mean, it's Hayden is in the suit at portions of it.
Yeah.
Vader seems like he's finally got Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan just goes full master on him again. It makes A New Hope even better with that scene, because I mean the Vader and Obi-Wan scene in A New Hope,
Yeah.
action wise, underwhelming. You've got a senior citizen fighting Darth Vader, and it's just not exciting. But when you
Accurate.
throw in the fact that Obi-Wan has beat Anakin at his strength, his highest point as far as power and everything goes, is Anakin Vader. He does it again when Anakin's in the suit. How cool is that? And then he, again, takes the mask halfway off. Anakin gives that spiel, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's a better line in Star Wars than that. I mean,
It
that's
is a good
like,
one.
because
Yeah.
Star Wars is about Anakin, and so he's sitting there saying, "Hey, you didn't kill Anakin. I killed Anakin. This is my movie, not yours." Like, how cool is that for him to
Yeah.
say that? And you got the blue on his face and the red, just a lot of storytelling there.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Kenobi isn't my favorite live action show, but that moment is still probably at the top of my list as well. I mean,
Yeah,
to see, because one of the reasons is we've talked about this before. Like Obi-Wan doesn't really get to shine a lot in the prequel movies, right? Has that great fight with Anakin. But other than that, he doesn't have like any. I mean, they have the arena, the Colosseum battle, which is
yeah,
against the big monster aliens.
yeah,
Um, but so to see him, like, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi as a Jedi Master, right? Like, that is a really cool moment. And it bridges that. It tells us how he gets to where he is, right? Like, how does he regain resolve in the midst of, gosh, all the stuff he's been through, right? And in that moment, we kind of see where he's able to move, maybe not move past this thing, but at least start putting it behind him.
yeah.
Um, so it is such a good scene that sets up the end of the show really well, and sets him up in a really really compelling way for A New Hope. So
Yeah.
man, it's exciting to watch, but it's also got a lot of weight behind it.
It's so
which
heavy. Like,
which really, yeah,
usually
because you kind of come
shows
back to
like,
that same you come back to that same sorrow, right, of watching Revenge of the
yeah,
Sith and just like, oh, this is terrible. Like it
yep.
really hits back on that heavy note of just. I mean, and we know it, right? We've seen the original trilogy.
Mhm.
We know Vader doesn't just change his mind, but to watch it still happen, you're just
Yeah.
like, man, it still sucks,
Tough.
right? Like this is
Yeah.
not fun.
Well, like I don't get emotional about entertainment. Like it's just it's entertainment, right? Like it's not real world. It's not important in the grand scheme of things. It is an escape, right?
Yeah.
And so in that one scene, it was just like I had a lump in my stomach just sitting there watching it. Cause like in Revenge of the Sith,
Yeah.
Obi-Wan is condemning Anakin, right?
Yeah.
Like he's on the bank and he's on fire. He don't have any legs. And
Yeah.
he's telling him, you are the chosen one. You did all this wrong. And it's like this real note of condemnation of Anakin. You really messed up.
Yeah.
And then in Kenobi, he has the exact same moment, but he says, I'm sorry, Anakin, for
Yeah.
everything. And so it's and everything. The Jedi, the leaving him there on Mustafar, not trusting him in episode 3, everything. And then you still get Vader saying it was me, not you. And so it's just
Yeah.
so cold and it's like, this is heavy stuff. And so I just love that scene.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out is how different he is in his tone with Anakin. Because if the Jedi had been that humble with him in the first place,
Would never have happened.
things would have been different, right? But
yeah.
It
in this
took too
fictional
long.
series.
And I think you see that there with Obi-Wan, like the recognition that it took too long, right? That they should have been here sooner. So, man, yeah, that is heavy.
And then at the end of it,
I can imagine you. I think it's funny. You're sitting there like, what is this feeling? Am I sad?
Yeah. Oh.
I'm a sucker for emotional stories, so they get me every time.
Well, I will say too, like Obi-Wan almost changes on a dime too. Like he puts his heart out there and says, I'm sorry for all of it. But then when Anakin's like, I don't accept your apology, Obi-Wan says, so long, Darth. And he's ready for Luke at that point. So it sets him up just on his next meeting to Vader, essentially. So I just think there's a lot in that scene that bridges the prequels and the original trilogy that maybe gets overlooked.
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense for why he's so dismissive of any part of Anakin Skywalker still existing, right? With Luke, that we see when he comes back as a Force ghost.
Yep.
That him and Yoda are both just like, nah, nothing there.
That guy's a goner. So as far as my runner-ups or honorable mentions, obviously when Luke comes back in The Mandalorian, that was so cool.
I
think
great scene.
Episode 3 of season 1 of The Mandalorian, where Mando turns Grogu in but then goes back and gets him. That is a great episode. So good. And then The World Between Worlds in Ahsoka, that one was up there too. But I thought this one probably carried the most weight thus far.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now for the movies. So I'll go ahead and do mine just because it rolls right in, kind of on my soapbox. But Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan versus Anakin on Mustafar. Again, lots of emotion there. You got this kid who Obi-Wan was never supposed to be his master in the first place. He ends up being, his master. Yeah. They get thrown into a war together. They turn into, best friends. They're doing all this stuff together. They're broing it up. Anakin turns bad. And so you've got all that emotional weight there. And as a 12 or 13-year-old, whatever I was when it came out, like, it was the only missing piece of Star Wars. How does Anakin turn into this machine Vader? Because we knew it had to happen. Just don't know how. And obviously, like, the scenery looks like hell. That's what George Lucas wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
You've got those blue sabers clashing amongst all the lava and stuff, which really pops. They both trained for that, like, for months and did all their own stuff. Just so good. And as far as the prequels go, sometimes the CGI is like too much. And I feel like for whatever reason, they nailed it on Mustafar. I don't know if it's because they were doing something realistic like lava, so it was like something
I get what you're saying.
But, you watch some of it, like Geonosis does not look realistic at all. And then you've got this looks really good. I don't know how they made it look so good, but they did. And then, of course, the story aspects and everything to it as well, on top of the choreography, action, the
Yeah.
score, Battle of the Heroes. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that with the CGI, but you're right. It doesn't really stand out. Maybe it's because it really is overused with like the Geonosians, the battle droids. I think at that point you're like, this is a lot of digital stuff on the screen right now. So maybe
Yes.
without all of that, and maybe it doesn't feel as cluttered. I don't know. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Also,
But no, go ahead.
you may know this fun fact, but when they were making the movie, if you watched it in theaters, you've never seen that version again because they forgot to add sweat in on Anakin and Obi-Wan. And so
Did not know that.
if they're sweating at all, it's just naturally from them doing all the choreography. But then on the DVD and everything, they had to go in and add more because they're like fighting on a lava planet, and they didn't account for that. So I thought that
Sounds
was
like
interesting.
fire.
But yeah,
Yeah, no,
George loves to
I
tinker with post product. So
He does. Yeah, sometimes a little too much.
yes,
I did not know that. That's interesting. I'm glad I saw it like 3 times in its original state.
yeah, and you'll never
I didn't
see
know.
it again that way.
Never
Now
see
they're
it
real
again.
sweaty.
Yeah. No, it is. It is a good scene. The choreography itself, like you mentioned, is just incredible. Like
It'll never be better.
there's no lull in that battle. Like it's just constant.
They punch each
But it
other.
is. It's just the
Like they
culmination of
punch
a
and
lot,
kick.
though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they do. It's crazy. You mentioned it, like the idea that there used to be a time where we didn't know how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, right? Like that it was just this thing that was adrift in George Lucas's mind, and so to see that
Yeah.
come about after investing so much in this character story, it was a heavy moment, and it's coming, but like it doesn't really blunt the trauma of it. It's like especially because it's the two of them, right? Like it could have happened any other way, but it's Kenobi and Skywalker. It just
Even
it
the
makes it so much
promotional
worse.
materials, you knew
Yeah,
what was coming because they
yeah,
put that on everything. That two scene of them
right.
fighting each other
Yeah,
there when they're like grabbing, that was on literally everything. And then with the New Hope, you knew that it had to be Obi-Wan beating Anakin
yeah,
because of what Vader says. Now that brings up different meaning now with Kenobi out there, but at the time it didn't. So you knew it had to be Obi-Wan. You just didn't know the severity or how they got there.
yeah. And I think that's a credit to how well. Whatever your complaints with the prequels were, it is a credit to how well the story was told, right?
Yeah.
When you know how something is going to go, and it still draws you in, and it's still compelling. There are elements of storytelling that carry over between stories, but it comes down to how you tell it as to whether it really grabs you or not. So, despite the fact we all knew what was coming, and it still really, really drew us in. I think that is a credit to how well the whole story was told, but especially that story between Anakin and Obi-Wan.
And how about Obi-Wan saying, it's over. I have the high ground. What an iconic line now.
It is.
Like that's
It's
supposed to
funny
be
how
the thing
stuff
that
like that.
deters a Jedi. Like,
Yeah,
I know you got the Force and all, but got a little bit, I'm up on a higher
yeah.
elevation than you.
I have to think that Ewan McGregor never thought that he would hear those words so many times throughout his life just from that movie. But yeah,
Yeah,
it took on a life of its own. It's kind of
it
like
did.
the hello there, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
he's, those
So
two
what's
things
yours?
he hears a lot. Mine's been the same for a while, and it's from Return of the Jedi. Um, it's the scene in the throne room, right, dueling between Vader and Luke, where Luke throws down his saber and says his iconic line, right? I'm a Jedi like my father before me. That's always been my favorite. I think I've grown to appreciate it more as I've gotten older,
Yeah.
and more as the story's really been enriched by stuff before it. Um, you could talk a lot about this scene. In fact, go watch again. I think we mentioned this last
Yes.
week, but like Will from Diamond Kids has been doing a series of, like people's favorite scenes, and he did
Yeah,
one
yeah,
with
yeah.
Beyond the Dune Sea, and it was this scene.
Mhm.
So go watch that because they talk about
Yep,
it for like an hour and a half, and it's awesome.
they do. That's a
Um,
good one.
it is. But to more briefly explain why I love it so much, um, you track back a little bit to Vader's perception of Luke and the Emperor, right? And when they meet up and Luke kind of surrenders himself, he says a few things. He says, "You don't know the power of the dark side," right? And he says, "Oh gosh, it just left my mind." Uh, he says,
It's too
"What
late
does he
for
say about
me.
himself?" Yes, goodness gracious. He says, "It's too late for me, my son."
That's
Right?
that's a
Calls him
killer
my
line
son.
right there.
It
Yeah,
is, right? Acknowledging Luke as his son, which is therefore acknowledging he's Anakin Skywalker. Um,
and knowing he
and
can't do anything about it,
right, and so
or
Vader has
thinking
this,
he can't.
yeah, Vader has this perception that you can't escape the dark side. It's going to win. Luke's either going to die or join the Emperor, right? Those are the two options of how this is going to play out. And so we get up to the Death Star, and Palpatine's doing the same thing with Luke, right? He's trying to create this situation where Luke feels he has no choice, right? Your friends are going to die. You better kill me, right? You better get
Yeah.
mad and strike me down, right? Same thing with Anakin. Well, if you want Padme to live, you should probably join the dark side. So this ploy of like you can't save what you want to save without giving in, right? And so Luke gives in a little bit, right? But then he draws back. He's still fighting Vader. Then Vader does the same thing as his master, right? Oh, well, if you won't join, maybe I can get your sister. So then Luke loses it, right? And this is where
and it
really
works.
It does. And that's if you listen to the soundtrack in this moment and watch what's happening, you're watching Luke fall. And there's like a really somber note to the music here because you're like, oh no, like it's happening. And then he beats the fool out of Vader. He cuts off his hand, and then Vader. I have to imagine Vader's laying there like, here it is, right?
Uh-oh.
I was right about the dark side. I was right about how this was going to end. There's no escaping this, right? Just the way I couldn't escape it, my son's not going to escape it. And so I love that in that moment, he watches his son do something different, right? He sees this idea that the dark side can't lose, that the dark side will always win. But then he sees Luke Skywalker say, you know what? This is not what I'm choosing. He casts his lightsaber down, and he doesn't say, you're not going to get me because I'm better than my father, right? He says, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. You know, the good I'm doing, what I'm choosing now is because it's what my father chose at one point. And so just being able, like, really restores to Vader Anakin in that moment, right? Like, hey, you can choose differently. Look, I'm doing it, right? And so Vader watches his son choose something that he didn't think was possible, and then in the same instance is reminded that he once did that, right? Like we talked about it, Anakin tried to do the right thing for so long before finally slipping and falling. And so I love that moment so much because in that moment, Luke demonstrates to Vader that there was a choice, and that because there was a choice then, there's also a choice now.
Yep.
And then we see Vader decide, you know what, it's not a done deal, right? Like there is a way to escape this thing, and then the rest plays out, and he kills the Emperor. But
he really does, though. He really does die.
yeah, in form. But man, I love that scene, and I love it every time, just because that view of Luke Skywalker almost as a Jedi, right? We talk about how Jedi are guardians, really almost standing as a guardian between Vader and Palpatine in that moment. It's such a cool visual, and so man, that's always been my favorite scene. I don't know how something will upend it, because to me it ties together what Star Wars is for me.
It can't.
And so it's so good.
Also,
that's
scene,
the brief version of why I love it.
Yeah. Well, that scene is like a train wreck of 3 big story points all converging into one as well. If you look at it, because you've got Luke's story barreling in, like because Yoda says you still have to face Vader. You're not a Jedi yet. You still have to face Vader. And what it turns out is Yoda assumes defeating Vader. And that's not what it is. He does defeat Vader and then walks up to that line of the dark side and then turns and says no. And so that's Luke's story going up to there. You've got Anakin's and Vader's story both coming to an end, at the same point. And then you've also got the Emperor's coming to an end as well, which wasn't.
Yeah.
But like he's doing that same trick again. He's like, I got Anakin this way. I'm gonna get Luke this way. It's gonna be great. And then it doesn't. Right? Anakin gets to right that wrong. And so it's an ending 6 movies in the making. It's so good.
Yeah. And it carries weight because, like you mentioned, Luke does fall. Like briefly, temporarily, he falls to the dark side, right? And so
yeah,
he doesn't pursue that path, but it'd be different if Luke never struggled with it and was like, oh, it's fine, it's the dark side, everybody can resist. But he actually does get there for a moment and is still able to choose differently. And I think that's what really sways Vader. That he saw Luke experience the same thing he did, but choose something different. Man, it's good stuff.
Well, not that I'm crazy about the sequel trilogy at all. Specifically, Episode 9, it's my least favorite. But at the very end, where you see Palpatine doing the same things he did in Episode 6, like trying to trick Rey the same way, it's consistent. And then also, like, who's the only person to ever train Rey in the Force? Essentially, it's Luke, right? With hints of Leia, and who trained Leia? Luke. So you're going to try to tempt her the same way Luke was. And then, it's the ultimate Skywalker victory where the Palpatine chooses to not be a Palpatine, essentially. Like, I don't like it, but again, that kind of, it checks out, and it's very similar to this scene. Yeah. So if it's something they're going to rip off later on, it must have been good.
Yeah.
Must have been true. A good scene.
Yeah. It's almost like Rey chose to be a Skywalker. They should have put that in there somewhere.
Awkwardly at the end, after she kisses Ben Solo. So speaking of runner-ups, my 2 runner-ups were the kiss and Rey Skywalker, and the Canto Bight scene. Those are my runner-ups. No.
Winners.
No, as far as runner-ups go, this one was up there for me, The Return of the Jedi, because honestly, if you're following my train of thought, you've got Ahsoka, you got the correct viewing order of all Star Wars duels, if you want to watch it as Anakin's story, is you watch Anakin versus Obi-Wan in Episode 3. Mm-hmm. Then you watch Anakin versus, I want to say timeline-wise, it would be Anakin or Vader versus Obi-Wan. Then it would be the Rebels versus Ahsoka. Then it would be versus Luke in Episode 6. I think that would give you a nice full picture of Star Wars.
Yeah.
If you did that. So that one was up there for me. And then also a Duel of the Fates is up there. And
Duel of the Fates
I think the Death Star run, really cool. Like in Episode 4.
Oh, man. Oh, I mean, when you watch that movie for the first time and you watch, it blows you away the first time you watch it. And Han Solo
blows the Death Star away, too.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Duel of the Fates is good. Yeah, there's some really good scenes.
I think the Yoda and Luke Skywalker scene's pretty good in The Last Jedi. I mean, it's not like top whatever, but it's probably my favorite sequel scene.
That scene is very consistent with the rest of Star Wars in terms of
it's a good fit. It's like it's a good Luke Skywalker. Like, if you would be like, oh, I hate Disney Luke Skywalker, get in line, whatever. But that scene, I like the fact that has to happen, that Yoda has to be like, you don't get it yet. And he has to push him one more time. I'm cool with that. Han Solo talking to Ben Solo, the 7 and 9, where they parallel, that's good storytelling there. I don't want to completely leave the sequels out. Like, there's some good scenes there, too.
Yeah, no, all of my issues with the sequel movies had more to do with the storytelling they chose. There are some really good moments in there that are very
Star Wars-y.
Especially in terms of how it deals with some of the characters. Like Yoda, we see regret. We see him trying to make up for it in the original trilogy. And then we see he's moved past it, right? Like, he's learned some things and he's trying to pass that on to Luke. So you do kind of see a full arc for Yoda throughout that scene. So that is a good scene. There are some good things in there.
There are. So, I mean, I think the main takeaway from this entire episode is, like, it's really hard to choose favorite scenes, but there are some that just they really knock it out of the park. And so I think we did an okay job at that. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
You tell us. Let us know in the comments. But also let us know what your favorite scenes were, because there are so many to choose from. If you want to break it down into categories, that's cool too, because I think it's healthy to separate, because movies versus animated versus show, they're different. But looking ahead to next week, by the time we film next week, potentially there will either be 1 or 2 episodes of The Bad Batch left. So I think next week we should make our Bad Batch finale predictions. We made our predictions at the beginning. We had our mid-season. So I think we should try to figure out what goes down in the finale. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah. You mentioned today was good. I haven't even had a chance to watch it yet. It's been such a crazy day. So
yeah. So if you're watching this on Friday, we filmed on Wednesday. So Kevin has not seen Into the Breach yet, and it's not.
I will have seen it by Friday. So
yeah, it's not a filler. I'll tell you that much. It's not filler.
I might watch it tonight. We'll see. I'm old now and I get tired. So
22 minutes, you got it. Unless you have ads, it's 27, because that's what I have. Man. So that will be next week. Otherwise, thank you guys again so much for watching. It's kind of crazy that anyone chooses to tune into this, but we appreciate that you do. If this is your first time watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.